Yep. And we've only had like 4 years in the last 50
Mm.
where we've added more than like 5% to the grid in a year. And most of those are recovering from a recession. So it's just that we went back to work and we use more power. So we need to have like a 1950s and 60s build out of the industrial plant for electricity at the same time we're doing everything else. And if we can't get the power on, none of the rest of this can happen. So we need to do it like, yesterday. Second best option would be today or tomorrow. I,
I
I'm I'm not an investor guy, but
I
it's hard
know.
to argue that a bet in the technologies of urbanization wouldn't be a good bet right now because
Yeah.
all of our cities need to have industrial plants expanded. Not all places are going to be equal. I think in absolute terms, Texas looks the best. I think in relative terms, I think North Carolina looks the best, but there's a story everywhere. I don't want to tell you to not worry about that, but let me kind of put it in context. If the Russians achieve what they want to do in Ukraine and Poland and Romania and the rest, they'll have built an external buffer and they'll have narrowed the access points. Right now, they've got about functionally about 4,000 miles of open border. And if they get to these places and they can anchor in seas and deserts and mountains, that shrinks down to about 400 miles. So, they reduce the problem by 90%. Um, for them, military strategies are an appropriate approach to solving this problem. Doesn't mean they're going to be successful, but it makes sense. If you're in China, what do? There's nowhere to go. China needs access to the world for raw materials and to Europe and the United States for end markets. So a military strategy doesn't solve anything for them. They go into Russia, the Russians have made it very clear they'll just get nuked. If they go into Vietnam, they'll be treated just as badly as they did the last time they did it in 79. India's on the other side of the Himalayas. The United States is on the other side of an ocean. So there's nowhere that they can go. And threatening someone to buy your stuff isn't a great military or economic strategy.
They're in trouble.
Yeah,
They
so I don't want to say it can't happen. I
yeah.
just want to say that it doesn't fix anything for them. Well,
Why?
let's assume for the moment that they could. Let's assume for the moment they could conquer Taiwan in less than a month and capture it mostly intact.
Right.
And uh, it's,
Right.
they
Right.
can't operate the semiconductor facilities because they can't operate their own back home, which are like 90, I'm sorry, they can do 90 nanometer and bigger chips.
Yeah.
Taiwan specializes in 10 and smaller, and all of the facilities that are in between 10 to 90 in China are operated by foreign staff.
Game changer.
If we're going to do the green transition successfully, we need a better transmission system than copper and aluminum, and we need a better battery storage than lithium. At the moment, I'm unaware of anything that's the prototype stage that would match those criteria. So you're looking for the right thing, and the smart money is working on it, but I'm unaware of anything that's near breakthrough. I think the only thing that's hit prototype that looks promising is artificial intelligence, and I don't think that that's going to really change things for the next decade. The problem's the manufacture. All of those chips come from one town in Taiwan.
Hmm.
And regardless of what happens with the Chinese, we're not going to be able to produce them much longer. They require a constellation, a logistical tail of something like 9,000 companies around the world, most of which only produce one product for one end user and have no competition. It's something that I think is worthy of deep thoughts, and I'm really actually kind of proud of us for having conversations about it before it's here. We don't do that very often, but I think we're going to have a lot more time than we think because if that constellation breaks down, and all you have to do is lose like one or two countries. Germany is the one I'm most concerned about. We just can't make the chips anymore. So we're going to have a few more years to figure this out as we build an alternate supply system. No, you've got general artificial intelligence and then you've got applied. And general is Skynet. We're nowhere close to that, a thinking machine. Applied, that's like what we're seeing with Chat GPT, where you just load data into the system or give it a very, very sophisticated decision tree, and it can't wander out of those parameters because it can't think. Now, that is still potentially game-changing technology in any number of sectors,
Yeah.
but it's not sentience.
Yeah.
There's more to sentience than processing power.
Come on.
The short version is we're all really stupid, and nuclear has a bad rap for things that it has not done. The slightly longer version is Greenpeace is one of the most successful Soviet agitation propaganda programs that they've ever done. And they are in part responsible for, among other things, the Green Party in Germany. And they are very, very proud of how much they've turned the West against nuclear power in general. They're building them as quickly as they can. Now they have about, I want to say 40% as many as we do right now. But here's another news shock. The Chinese are not nearly as smart as everyone seems to think they are, especially when it comes to practical engineering.
Really?
Yeah, no, it's a very low value added economy. The reason that we think of them as this intellectual juggernaut is their top 1% are pretty bright. And the top
They're over
1%,
here. Yeah.
the top 1% of 1.3 billion people is 13 million people.
Yeah.
That's a lot, but it's not enough for a broad scale first world economy. There are some interesting things going on in energy that are not related to nukes and are not related to solar or wind. Well, actually, one thing for wind, the new turbines are a kilometer tall.
What?
Yeah, isn't that nuts?
They're a kilometer tall?
Yeah, as you go up, you hit stronger wind currents that are more reliable.
So wait, they're a mile high.
Kilometer.
Kilometer. Okay, I'm sorry.
Use your metric.
2.2. Yes. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, sorry.
It's still really
it's still a half
tall.
A mile. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty high. God.
And so we're actually seeing in the Great Plains, especially in West Texas, people are already starting to use wind power for base load. It's not as intermittent once you get up to those altitudes.
Do they build them right there? They have to bring them in parts and then assemble
exactly.
Them right there.
Yeah. And the more segments you put up, the less structurally sound it is. So the smart play is to now build the wind turbine blades as close to distribution as possible. One of the problems we had with the early phases of the wind revolution is as the turbine blades got bigger and bigger and bigger, there were certain roads that they just couldn't take them on. Yeah. So they had to build them on the other side of that infrastructure. And some of that infrastructure, industrial plant is now in place and it's proceeding.
How well do they work, these kilometer high?
They have all the normal problems that you would associate with something of that size. Yeah. But you don't need nearly as many of them to generate the same amount of electricity. So long gone are the fields that just carpet and you just have a line of them just stretching off into the distance.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's promising. Something else that's promising, we just had our first prototype project finished for a updated, enhanced geothermal facility where they took shale drilling and seismic technology and married it to the geothermal steam system. So geothermal until now has been you look for a hot spot in the crust that is within a couple hundred, maybe a few hundred feet of the surface. So think Yellowstone, geysers. And you run a pipe into it, you capture the steam, you use it to run a turbine. The new ones use shale seismic tech to find a hot spot that might be 2 miles down. And then you drill down with shale tech and go laterally into it in order to build a closed loop system where you have got the heat down way, way, way down below, generating what you need for the power. The downside of the original system is not everybody lives on a glacier, or excuse me, on a geyser. Yeah. The advantage of the new system is everyone lives over shale. It's one of the most common rock formations. And we're not looking for petroleum here, we're just looking for heat. So all you have to do is go down. So the first project in Vegas is up and running. It was a pilot project. Technically, it's been a success. The second one will be in Utah, which will be commercial grade, something like 600 megawatts, so like a proper power plant. And if that one works and the numbers look good, we'll be doing this in every single state.
ট্রেন নেই, ট্রেন চলে গেছে, ট্রেন চলে গেছে, আর ট্রেন নেই।